Okay, wow. I'm sorry, I'm collecting myself just a little bit here. As we show our appreciation, put our love in the chat. In a minute here, we are going to be starting our panel discussion with some amazing folks who this show would never have happened without. Yeah, keep that love coming in the chat for all of these people who made this show, and for Anne, and for the movement for justice, the other America that still is very much alive here in Louisville, Kentucky today. We are on day, I don't know, we're up to almost day 270 of continuous protests in Louisville, Kentucky. For those of us here, it's been a long year, and so just keep showing that love. Definitely a labor of love. Whew. Okay. So folks, I am going to have the people who are here as panelists to talk about this production. I'm going to have them introduce themselves one at a time. I am going to say again that my name is Elijah Fossil. I work for a group called the Peace Education Program here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I also am Isaac's younger sibling. So Isaac, I'm going to pass it back to you if there's anything else you want to say as an introduction. I know you did a little bit already, but if you want to say anything to introduce yourself a little more.
Yeah, I think I said most of it. I'm Isaac Fossil Van Wyk. I've been working with Squalus for only about a year and a half. Yeah, we're going to get deeper into the weeds with this program, but I'll pass it on to what is that? To Skylar Tatro.
Are we just introducing ourselves?
Yeah, we're just introducing ourselves.
Perfect.
Yeah, go for it.
My name is Skylar, and I work with Squalus Puppeteers, and I helped with some of the voices and kind of helped manage a little bit of the entire production, just keeping things on track and creating schedules, reaching out to folks, and helped with some shadow puppet stuff. And I'm going to pass it to Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan Lanham, and in this process, I helped with the making of the Cranky Scroll, and talking out like ideas and the illustrations and whatnot for that. So that was my fun part, fun contribution.
I meant to draw attention to that. We have the Cranky device behind me, which Jordan had an amazing hand in helping to create. Anyway, we'll get into it, but I'm just saying that's behind me.
There it is.
Well, hi,
Great.
I'm going to introduce
Nora?
myself.
Yeah, I was going to say pass it to Nora. Here you go.
Hi there. My name is Nora Christensen, and I'm artistic director at Squalus and one of the founders. Still here, and I helped make the puppet a couple years ago for the original show, and then I puppeteered the tabletop puppet and helped with the shadow puppets in this show. And I'm so happy the show got a second chance to have a second life. So I'll leave it there for now. And let's see, Keith, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Keith McGill. I do a little bit of acting, a little bit of teaching, a little bit of whatnot around town. I know 30% of the people in this room are so funny. And I was Carl Brayton's voice in this. I don't know to whom to pass it. What's that? What? Yes, I wasn't Carl. It was because that would be hilarious. No, I was Mr. Wade's voice in this. All right, I don't know who do I pass it to? I'm not the best.
We've got Kate Fossil in the house. Maybe she can introduce herself.
All right, Kate, hit it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm all but speechless, really. And my kids know I'm very rarely speechless. I'm Kate Fossil. I use she, her pronouns. I had the privilege of being Anne's biographer. So I took her original story written in 1958, The Wall Between, and built on that and worked with her through a lot of oral histories and came to know Anne through that project. And so my kids really grew up like sort of, Anne was both a mythical figure, but also like a very real person in our lives. And that was a great honor for me. And more recently, I was a co-founder of the institute named after her at the University of Louisville. So we were really excited to collaborate with Squalus, had worked with Nora on the original puppet, and that puppet, Nora, was the start of the whole thing. And then when you and Isaac and the others came together, it was just a really special kind of alchemy. So thanks so much, everybody. I really enjoyed the show.
Okay, wonderful. And yes, if you all were not able to put together, there's many reasons that this show would never have happened without Kate Fossil, but one of them is that she is indeed the mother of both Isaac and myself. So there's a real, there's a real family lineage here happening. And a legacy being carried forth is really the way that I like to think about it, for sure.
That is also on the call to represent.
Oh yeah. I saw him he's not on my screen, but yeah,
Great.
Our dad is he also never would have happened without. Thanks, Papa, for joining us. It's always great to see you. Okay, so let's have some questions. I'll say to you all, so this is Elijah speaking. For our panelists, I'm going to ask that we try and remember to say, this is Elijah speaking, this is Nora speaking before we start, for any of us who are either can't see or are calling in on their phone. It's very helpful. And then I'm going to be asking some questions of the folks on the panel, but if you have a question that you'd like for us to ask, there's no way for us to get to everyone's questions, but just go ahead and put them in the chat. If you want to be anonymous, you can directly message them to me, or you can just put them in the chat with everyone. And when we get to the moment where we're taking some questions from folks who are here in the audience, I'll go to those and I'll draw from them, and we'll get through as many as we can in the time that we have. And we might go a little past 8 o'clock. Of course, folks are welcome to leave at 8, but that's the time that we asked you to schedule for, but we might go a little bit beyond that with some of this discussion. And at one point, we're going to ask to hear some from you all, but we're going to start off by talking to the panelists. So if you have questions that pop up at any point, they came up during the show, put them in the chat and I'll see them there, or directly message them to me. Okay, so Nora, I'm going to start with you. So this show began with just you, one woman show with just that Anne Braden puppet in a tiny living room in 2014. What originally made you want to share this story through puppetry? What made you want to bring this story to people?
Well, I was inspired by Anne while she was living, and I also, the story, I should say, I made it in 2016 while Obama was president in the post-racial America, which I was not buying. And I thought it was really important to remind people there's still a lot of work to do. And so I wanted to work with kids to start inspiring them and teaching them about local civil rights history in our city, women's history, also just to kind of start discussions about things that I saw and wrong in our city, and to let kids know that if they're seeing it too, they have a place to talk about it. And so I just always thought Squalus's role was to help teach kids to be the revolutionaries of the future. And so this was kind of my plan, was to get kids thinking about it when they're young, so they grow up to be the change makers of the future. So I had challenges with the show, trying to do it all at once. And then, so it was really the combination of Isaac working with Squalus and COVID and needing, we were really inspired to bring the show back. So I am so happy to have this chance to bring it back with the video format and with Isaac and everyone else who helped. So yeah, I'm so glad I got a chance to be in front of kids again.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nora. This is Elijah again. I love the Anne puppet. I just absolutely adore it. And that's a great connection to the next question I was going to ask, which is you, Isaac. So you took this work that had been started by Nora and you adapted it to the show that we all just saw. And I know that was a really long and complicated and challenging process to bring such a complicated story to a medium that would be something that young people and people of lots of ages could access. Could you explain like what it was like having that challenge presented to you of bringing a complicated story like this to a young audience?
Well, it was really difficult. I think that probably the most important thing that I had with me was my sense of very incredible stubbornness, which everyone in my family knows about. That was like kids can insisting that kids can understand something that plenty of adults don't know about or struggle to understand themselves. So that was a sort of one way out to not worry so much about what kids were and weren't able to understand. But also, I had never read, embarrassingly, I had never read Anne's original memoir, The Wall Between, and the script that I wrote was really, really inspired by that. I mean, a lot of it is directly from her text, and the way that she wrote was so. This is not an insult, but it's so sort of basic and breaks things down into such understandable little building blocks that, I mean, it's no wonder that she had such a way with, organizing white people who may have been completely repulsed by the idea of racial justice at the beginning of, before they did work with her. And yeah, so there was a way in which the way the book was written was really amenable to the kind of like logic of, any child, any thinking and feeling person could understand, because she was so careful about being empathetic, especially towards the people that she had the most conflict with and that she disagreed with the most.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you repeat the title of that book for folks who may want to look into this book if they're just newly arriving at Anne's story?
Right. So Anne in 1958 wrote a book called The Wall Between, and it was re-released, I believe, in 1999. And she wrote another afterword to it, which is in some ways some of the most interesting parts of the book to look back on it 40 years after it was written, and talk about what changed, where the people are now, what happened afterwards when she couldn't have known in 1958.
Yeah, you can see Kate is holding up a copy of the book. If you have gallery view on, you can take a look at that. It has a nice purple cover, easy to spot. It's a phenomenal piece of work. So Keith, I wanted to ask you a question. Keith, this is Elijah speaking again. So you advised on the script and you played the voice of Andrew Wade, but because of COVID, because of producing this during the coronavirus, you weren't actually able to even see the play until its final product. So Can I ask you a little bit, what was it like playing Andrew, Mr. Wade, and then what was it like working in this sort of odd condition of advising on it and acting in it, but then never seeing the final product until it was really all but done?
Well, I knew Anne Braden's story. I didn't know all of the details that were in the script, but I knew Anne Braden's story with Carl, and I knew the Wade story. And so going into it, I knew what the story was. And then Isaac reached out and he said, "Do you want to do the voiceover for this person?" I said, "Oh, yeah, that'd be great." For me, just sort of, I mean, with any acting, just sort of putting myself into the shoes of the person who it's going through. And that part was I would say is the simpler part. But the trick, I work at Commonwealth Theater Center, and we have been trying to figure out how to still do still do theater with children during COVID. And so I've done a lot of virtual teaching. We've done a lot of small classrooms, and we've done a lot of filming and put it up. So that process wasn't the hard part for me, really. Fortunately, I had already been doing that kind of thing. I think the hardest part was sitting in like the really cold basement of Squalus and trying not to let my teeth chatter while I'm doing voiceover, because it had the best acoustics. And so we were sitting in that, it was like super cold. I think it was like 30 degrees that day. And so I'm just sitting there with gloves on, just trying to imagine summer. So that might have been the trickiest part. But I was thrilled to be asked to do this. Because I'm another thing I'm doing at Commonwealth is a piece called Nation in Crisis, where it also is talking about moments in African American history. So to be able to be part of teaching the story of what's happening in civil rights history, especially on a local level. We have so much local history that a lot of people don't even know. So to be able to be part of this and was just phenomenal.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you so much. This is Elijah speaking again. You know, I wanna dig deeper into you know, this story of Anne that we all know. We all maybe know some like different details, different pieces of it. I want to dive more into that, and I want to ask Kate about the history. But before I do that, while we're talking about sort of the production of it, I had a question that came from the audience that's really for all of the folks who worked on the production, all the people on the panel who worked to actually create the play itself. There's a lot of different types of art and puppetry contained in this play. There's the puppet of Anne, there's shadow puppetry, there's the cranky. Could you explain a little like some of the choices in different types of puppetry and art that are expressed in the film, and if there were any like inspirations, aesthetic inspirations for this piece and why it has so many different types of puppetry contained in it?
I can take a stab at that. I mean, so just to clarify, the original production that Nora had made was entirely, it was a really brilliant idea, but it was very limited in terms of the story that we could tell, that she could tell at that time, because she had a very interesting conceit of using only Anne's actual voice. So using these recordings of interviews that Anne had done. And that was the entire sort of sound component to the play, in addition to music. So when we decided to tell the story that we wanted to tell, which was to focus on the Wade story, we had to, I mean, I was like, well, I guess I'll do Anne Braden's voice. I did the voice of Anne Braden. And then we wanted to see how we could tell a bigger story without, especially with the COVID situation, without making a ton of other puppets, an entire puppet for Andrew and Charlotte Wade and Carl Braden and James Rohn and all of these things. I got really inspired about the format of the Cranky from mostly through friends of mine at the Bread and Puppet Theater, and also an amazing duo of people who are very famous for making Crankies called Anna and Elizabeth. If anyone hasn't seen their stuff, it's very impressive. But it was true. I mean, it was very much my style to have never made something like this before. And instead of doing a trial run of 5 or 10 feet long, we made just one that was about, I don't know, it's somewhere between 40 and 60 feet long of the Cranky, and just hoping that it would work. But it did. So.
Anyone else who worked on the production want to speak to the many pieces of art incorporated into the aesthetics of the production?
Well, I think shadow puppets are a really easy way to create a character pretty quickly, like what Isaac was referring to. There were so many people to represent, but we wanted to focus on the story, and that the shadow puppets and the Cranky were such a good fit together. And that was a little experiment. We had never tried that. So to have that in the background of the tabletop puppet, it all just seemed to fit well together to provide the visual elements needed to highlight the story. So we've always kind of mixed up our mediums with Squalus, and we kind of grab from all different things to make it visually and stimulating, and also the content be pretty stimulating. So we're always mixing it up a little bit. It's pretty normal for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, great, thank you all very much. So Kate, I want to ask you about a little more about Anne's story and the history You have really dedicated a lot of your life to telling Anne's story, to sharing her history of work. So I want to start off with maybe the most important question, like, did they get it right? Is the history in the play the right history? Did they really accurately capture Anne and her work and the story of the Wades and the Bradens?
You know, I would have to say that it is probably like 97% accurate according to the history that I know. And it's accurate. Like there's a couple tiny facts that are a little bit off, but of no consequence, really. I think that I mean, even just hearing, and I have to mention the family connection, like my own son do Anne's voice, and he didn't sound like Anne, but he sounded like Anne because of such an effective use of her words and her ways of pausing. So like there were some parts of it, and I thought, Keith, you were phenomenal as Andrew Wade. And one of the great privileges of my life really was doing the last interview with Andrew Wade that he ever gave. And it's not that you sounded like Andrew Wade, but it was so true to Andrew Wade. So I think that it was emotionally true in every level, and it was factually true to a very, very great extent. I was, as a historian, I'm very impressed. I said to my partner while we were watching it, I was like, they are teaching more about racism and anti-communism and segregation than many people ever get in any K through 12 education, and even in college.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely know that's true. So as a historian, you say it passes the test of being true enough, being right enough. That's what I'm hearing. So at the end of this play, we see a little bit of Anne Braden, the real life Anne Braden in that video clip. And she's at a protest against police brutality from 2002. Anne passed away a few years before killings of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown sparked the modern day Black Lives Matter movement. And of course, quite a few years before the murder of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and many others that sparked the global uprising for Black lives in 2020. Can you tell us what you think, just to the best of your ability, what do you think Anne would make of this moment, this uprising for Black lives that's happening so much locally and happening on a global, international level?
Well, Anne always loved to say that we don't need everybody. We just need an anti-racist majority. So I think that Anne would be very, very excited by what's going on. And there's a strange, like I only noticed it, Peter was pointing it out to me actually in this viewing, when she almost said like Black Lives Matter. She almost said that. She was talking about these lives mattering. And it was just such an eerie kind of foretelling of what was to come. But I do want to say, Elijah, I think there are many people on this call that know this, but in case those who don't, there was a very vibrant and active, much smaller and much more marginalized on every level movement here in Louisville in the early 2000s after the shooting of James Taylor, who ironically shared the same last name with Breonna Taylor, by the police in the process of his being arrested in 2001 or 2. And there was a whole string of those kind of murders, police murders of Black men. And there was a lot of protests, and Anne was at every one of those protests. So that footage you saw at the end was taken from one of those protests. And I just have to make a shameless plug. I'm going to shut up in a minute. But one is, if you haven't read Ricky Jones' column in the Courier this week about that very connection, you could learn a little bit more about it that way. And the second thing is, yes, Adrian Reynolds and his mother Ann Reynolds has been very vocal in the protests then and now. So some of the people are the same, some of the leaders are the same, but there's a whole new generation of leaders like you know, and others, many others, that it's just so much more widespread now. But the other thing I want to say is that final clip, I think it's in the credits, but for anybody that missed it, you know, there's a documentary film about Ann's life called Ann Braden, Southern Patriot, that was made by Appleshop. And that clip is taken from that video near the film near the end. So if those of you who aren't as familiar with the story, if you want more, you know, you've got a lot of resources, and that should be one of them. That's, you know, Appleshop is an Eastern Kentucky Arts and Media Institute that made that documentary. Just in the right when Ann died, actually, they were in the final stages of it. So thank you.
Yes, and included in those resources on that story is, of course, your book as well, Subversive Southerner. I know you said you're given a lot of plugs, but not plugging that one, which is also very, like, one of the most. Yeah, here, look, Nora has a tiny Subversive Southerner, which is actually placed in the set of the play. If you notice, there's a small Subversive Southerner.
I did see
cover.
that, Nora. That was amazing to see that, actually.
Squalus Puppeteers, are there any other little Easter eggs, any other parts of the set that are speaking to one of Ann's characteristics or, you know, hobbies or obsessions? For those of us who knew her even a little bit, I guess we would probably categorize them as obsessions.
We got a few more little books here. We got The Souls of Black Folk by W.B. Du Bois. We got biography of Angela Davis, Portrait of a Revolutionary. I don't know, I have the set as mostly taken apart, but it's here to my right that you can see a couple different items. We ordered smallest typewriter that we could find on eBay. It's called a Tom Thumb.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. Yes, and her
I know
stack of folders.
Someone in the chat wrote the stack of folders. And I thought that was pretty great.
Absolutely, yes.
I wanted to say we were really divided about giving Anne cigarettes because we know she smoked a lot, but this was a children's show, so we made that artistic decision to not include cigarettes. So
we got the TV 14 version coming out in 2022.
Yeah, not that I had a lot of secondhand smoke exposure, but what I did have was maybe 3 hands. I think if it was the most accurate.
From Ann Braden.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you all very much. We're coming up on 8 o'clock. I want to ask one final question, and then I'm going to ask a question to the audience as well that's related to this, and have some folks answer in the chat. So we have a multi-generational audience here on this call today, and as this piece of art, as this show goes forward into the world, Isaac mentioned at the very beginning, this is a show that was developed to bring to students, that was to bring to young people. And we're really looking at how this story can reach young people here in Louisville, in Kentucky, and across the country. This is a question for the whole panel, whoever would like to take a shot at it. But in a few words, just taking a minute or less, why do you think it is important for young people today in 2021 to know the story of Ann and Carl Braden and Andrew and Charlotte Wade? Too hard a question?
Not to put you on the spot.
I can start it up, I guess. I think it's important for young people to know history, is because if we don't know the history, it's going to come up again because they haven't seen it. There are probably hundreds of people in this town who don't know that you couldn't live in Shively before. That, you know, any history, it's like there are people who don't know that. So, I mean, I just think, and people of all ages should know all of the history so they can make informed choices rather than not knowing what's happened before, because it will come up again. It always does, because people forget the history and then it happens again. We're seeing that right now. We're seeing history do the same thing over and over and over. Every time I go into class and I do Nation in Crisis, some kid goes, "That's happening right now." And we go, exactly. So that's why we need to do things like this. And we need to make it accessible enough for people who don't know. For if I'm 6 or 7 years old, I have to go, you couldn't live where you wanted to? What kind of crazy world was this? Like, exactly. So you grow up in about 30 years, run for something, and change it.
Yes, and
Absolutely. Thank you.
if I might add something, Elijah, it's Kate again, very briefly. I think that, like Keith said, people don't know history, and there's an awful lot of the history that really, I mean, the parts of history that are known are so far from the parts that people need to know to be able to get justice for the society as a whole. And so, you know, my project, as you pointed out, was very much about bringing Anne's story to a larger audience. And I would really love to hear from the audience about this question of how to most effectively do that, because, you know, all choirs need practice. So it's really great for the people that are on this Zoom that are already involved, but how can we reach out more broadly with material like this? I would really encourage every one of you in this Zoom room to, you know, take a step at doing that using this vehicle and others. So thanks.
Thank you. So I'm going to pass it to Isaac to close, but as Isaac is closing, if folks feel comfortable sticking around for a few minutes, there's a question that Squalus and all of us really wanted to pose to you all who are here for this premiere of this amazing piece of work. And that question is the question of, what would it look like for you to bring this to youth that you work with, or to people that you work with? It doesn't have to be young people. It's targeted for young people, but it could be to anyone. Like, what would it look like for you to bring this into your classroom, into your community center, into your even to your team, to your sports team, whatever it is? How would that happen? Would it help for the youth or the people that you work with? Would it be a helpful tool? What could make it more helpful? Are there resources you would like to see it paired with? And so using the chat as we start to wind down, and if you feel comfortable staying on a few minutes after to continue to share that with us so we can continue to develop and further make this, like Keith said, it's so important that this is accessible, that it meets the needs of young people everywhere. You can help us do that by providing feedback on what this would look like for you, and would it be a helpful thing? What could make it more helpful? What could make it accessible to people that you work with? So Isaac, I'll pass it to you to do a little closing here, because I know that we're out of time.
Yeah, well, thank you, Elijah. This is Isaac again. That's definitely an ongoing question. Like I said, this is the debut. It's also the debut of sharing it with the wider world to be able to continue asking and answering that question. So just to give a little bit of a context for what's next, Elijah and I are working to develop some follow-up programming. As we mentioned, we just applied for an Arts Match grant through the Fund for the Arts to do a crowdfunding program that would basically allow people in our networks to donate to support this program being shared for free to schools and other community centers, and then the Fund for the Arts and other collections of great, enormous concentrations of wealth would be able to match that. So that's something to look out for sure. We're hopeful about getting that grant, and if we don't, we'll do it in another way. What else did I want to say? I think we've got it. Someone is posting in the chat the link to donate. Yes, Amanda's asking about it. There we go, Skylar, thank you. So there's a link to donate. It's also on our website, squallouspuppeteers.com. And I want to give a shout out to K.A. Owens in the audience here, representative of the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Oppression. As I mentioned, all donations this weekend, we're going to give 50% of them to the Kentucky Alliance to keep doing the great work that they're doing. And I'm going to look at my little list and make sure I haven't missed anything. But like I said, you know, the question of how it fits into your life and your world is an ongoing one. We would love to hear your, you know, people have been writing some really beautiful responses in the chat, and I thank you for those. If you have any testimonials that, you know, you would like to share with us after the fact, please just reach out. And yeah, I think that the exciting thing about the next stage of this is that it's not completely determined yet, and that with each audience that we encounter it with, it's going to be different. I think it is, you know, I see this as a majority white audience, and that is, it is what it is. I think it's, you know, sort of frowned upon in the virtue signaling age that we're in. But I also am very excited to work with majority white audiences to talk to white young people about their own role in the movement for racial justice and the many movements for racial justice. That's not to say that it's only for white children, but I think that with that, just to emphasize that each audience is going to be might be a different kind of a program. We've shown it to multiracial audiences in schools so far, and it's been really humbling and really amazing to see the way that people respond to it sort of universally, and then the way that different students respond to it based on their different experiences in this world. Yeah, we're over time. And I thank you all so much for coming. If there are any remaining burning questions, I'd be happy to take them. Feel free to take yourself off mute. I'll just wait for a second here.
What if we give folks who are gonna leave right now just a chance? Can people unmute themselves? Is that a possibility? Are they able to now?
Yeah, they're able to.
For folks who are leaving right now, feel free to come off mute and say goodbye before leaving. And if you want to stick around and ask a few more questions of Isaac, Squalous Puppeteers, Kate, or myself, then you can do exactly that. But let's take a moment to let folks come off mute and say goodbye if they'd like to.
Thank you all so much for doing this. I'm really happy that I got to be a part of it.
Yay! Thanks for being here, Micah.
Thanks, everybody. I was really grateful to learn more about your work. Micah McLean's friend in Baltimore and admirer of you all, and Micah McLean's. Thank you so much for hosting this program. And
thank you, Valeska. I've seen your work. I'm a great admirer of your work as well. It's so good to see your face.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Really wonderful. This is Nadine. Heard about it from, I think, Reddit Puppet Listserv from Marianne.
Oh, awesome. Amazing.
Yep. Just, yeah, so really awesome work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are you okay?
Oh, I was just waving. I was just gonna wave, and then I was gonna give it back to you all. I might have to leave before this fully wraps up here, Isaac, but I'm happy to help continue to take questions. Really, I'm not the person answering the questions anymore, so.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but a shout out to Beth Braden is on the call, and Braden's daughter. Thank you so much for being here.